Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California and the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Royce, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason we're concerned with cash going to Iran, especially $1.7 billion in cash, is because Iran is in the process with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps of funding terrorism in the region. And specifically what they're trying to do is get their hands on hard currency. So when they're trying to develop, for example, for Hezbollah, the capability to use GPS in order to be able to equip the missiles and rockets in the inventory with this special capability to be able to hit the tallest buildings in Tel Aviv or be able to get around the Iron Dome. This needs two things: the transfer of the missiles from Iran to Hezbollah. They already have transferred 100,000 of these rockets and missiles. And second, it needs the capability of being able to switch this over to this GPS capability. For that kind of terrorism, they need hard currency. That's why we're interested in the $1.7 billion cash payment. Because by insisting that it was the only way to get the money to Iran, we are strict in maintaining banking sanctions. This is hugely misleading, and let me explain why. The sanction system was designed with tribunal payments in mind. The Iran transaction sanctions regime contains a number of exemptions from the rule so that certain transactions can go forward. And in this case, transactions for tribunal settlements are explicitly authorized and would shield any entity involved in such a transaction from liability under U.S. law if this had been done the proper way without use of cash. No, it was the Iranians that wanted the cash. They wanted the cash because they're trying to fund terror. That's what the IRGC does. It is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world today. So the administration chose not to license a transaction within the international financial system. They chose to deliver $1.7 billion in untraceable assets, which was the demand on the part of Iran. And if everything was on the up and up and there is no connection to hostages, why not go through the process laid out in law? This is a state sponsor of terrorism. So you're right that banks don't want to do business with a country that is backing the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of innocents and those in Syria and developing missiles, ballistic missiles, by the way, aimed at us because they're intercontinental ballistic missiles. But the truth of the matter is that if you wanted to pay through a bank, you could have. The primary example here is North Korea and Banco Delta Asia. No one was more toxic than North Korea and the BDA. Not even Iran today, but when the last administration wanted to get North Korea, wanted to give the funds back to North Korea, it found a way using the New York Fed and the Russian Central Bank. It found a way through legitimate financial channels, which you certainly could have done. Likewise, you found a way during the interim agreement to facilitate $700 million back to Iran each month through international banking relationships. Yes, it would have taken longer, but the dispute this payment was supposed to settle was over 35 years old. What's a couple more months? The only way that I see timing coming into play, if this was a ransom for the release of Americans, and if this didn't drive the capture of 3 more Americans, and remember, that's what the Department of Justice said at the time, don't do this, it'll be perceived as ransom and we'll have more Americans captured. The heavy water payment, another $10 million. Now that's not much compared to the $1.7 billion, but was this paid in cash too? I'd certainly like to know, because the danger I see here is that cash is going to become the new normal for the Iranians. And lastly, I just bring up, pursuant to the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act in 2000, $400 million in taxpayer dollars was supposed to go to U.S. citizens to settle judgments against Iran for terrorist attacks. It looks to me like part of this understanding is letting Iran off the hook for those terrorism claims that was part of that settlement. Is that correct?
With respect to the victims of terrorism claims, as I answered one of your colleagues' questions, Those judgments were paid in 2000 with the Victims of Trafficking Act. Congress appropriated $400 million to pay them, so their judgments were paid.
But what about the interest on that should have come out of this account?
Those claims were then subrogated to the United States, so they became U.S. government claims, and they were factored into the overall settlement.
And in terms of my question on the situation of how this was handled with North Korea, why was it not handled the same way with respect to Iran?
Congressman, I am not familiar with North Korea, but what I can tell you is this. We share your concerns with respect to Iran's troubling activities. We have a variety of tools that we use to counter those activities, including robust sanctions, including sanctions that continue with respect to Hezbollah in legislation that was passed in this body. We continue to use those and intend to aggressively enforce those as we go forward. With respect to the mechanism of the payment, all I can say is that Iran did not, regardless of the legal prohibitions, Iran did not have the international relationships, did not have the accounts because of the sanctions that were so strongly imposed by this Congress. Accounts were not allowed during the sanction period, and as a result, Iran did not have those relationships. So it was difficult to do anything else in an immediate way, and the immediate payment of these funds is what allowed us to get favorable terms that were in the interest of the United States.
The immediate payment is what managed to coincide with the exact
time has
exchange
expired.
for our four hostages.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now